Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Ty, and I will be your moderator for today's program, Algorithmic Decision Making and AI in Hiring, Ethical DEI and Compliance Implications, presented by HR Morning and sponsored by Perceptual. Just a little housekeeping before we get started. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the chat box in the control panel. If they're regarding the subject being presented, I'll add them to the queue for questions at the end. Now I'd like to introduce your speaker, John Rood.
Well, thanks, Ty. I appreciate the warm welcome, and thanks to everybody here for attending. We're going to be talking AI today, and we're going to talk in a really specific way about what's going on with AI related to HR. And we're going to think about it from a couple different lenses. We're going to start by talking about what's going on in AI. I mean, this is like the hot topic that everyone is talking about, HR and in every function in the workplace. So we're gonna have a good time talking about that, and then we're going to kind of flip over and think about, what are some of the challenges that putting AI into the workforce and into the HR function bring up? We're going to talk about that from a DEI lens. We're going to think about it from a compliance lens as well. And then would love to take questions from any of you. So please do feel free to drop some questions in there and we'll go through them at the end. Real quick introduction from me. So I'm the founder of a company called Perceptual. We're perceptual.com. And what we do is that we help HR leaders, along with their legal teams, their executive teams, and their compliance teams, comply with all of these emerging regulations of automated and AI hiring systems. So, for those of you that watch the HR news closely, you see things like New York City Local Law 144, which went into effect about a month ago. We work with a number of large clients in that space, helping them comply with those new laws. We do a little bit of training as well. We do it for all size companies. We've worked with small startups all the way up to Fortune 1000s. So I always, when I put my presentations together, I always try to make it a little bit fun. And I ask the AI to do their part with my presentation as well. So as we go through here, all of the images are created by an AI program. So I used a program called DALL-E2, DALL-E.2, which is an AI image generator. If you haven't played with it yet, it feels like absolute magic to me. It's a year old and I've been playing with it for over a year, but it still feels like magic. So I asked the system to create an impressionist painting of the audience of an HR meeting, and this is what I came up with. So we can reflect, does this really look like what our meeting is like today? Oh, probably our meeting is a little bit different format, probably a little bit different makeup of the audience. I hope we have a more diverse audience today than is reflected there. And as we see what the AI generates, we'll kind of use that as a metaphor to think through what are some of the really cool, like magical parts about AI? What are the really useful parts about AI? And what are some of the challenging parts about AI as well? So already kind of talked about where we're going to go today. We're going to start with a good overview of AI specific in the HR function. We're going to talk about my 3-pillar model of ethical AI deployment. And then we're going to finish by talking through the 3 things that I think the HR leaders should be doing today to make sure that the rollout of AI into their organization is safe, fair, legal, and helpful. So let's start at a high level. When I give this presentation to HR audiences, I remember I gave this presentation at the National SHRM Conference in Las Vegas. That was 3 months ago now, at the beginning of the summer. Many of you might have been there, and I asked the audience, how many people have used ChatGPT, which is kind of the one that you hear about in terms of AI models most in the news. And I would say about 1/3 of the people raised their hand. I gave a presentation very similar to this to a large logistics company here in Chicago, where I'm based, 2 weeks ago. It was a little bit different of an audience, more of a techie audience, and it's 2 months later. And I would say probably 80% of people raised their hands. So, this is technology that's really spreading around. So when we talk about ChatGPT, it's what's called a large language model. So you'll hear that abbreviation LLM pretty frequently. And we don't have time today to get into really how does the system work, but it's trained on a big data set. So it sucks up information from all corners of the internet. And we'll hear a lot in the news next couple months about different authors who are concerned that the AI systems were trained on their copyrighted works. But all of this information is swept into the AI system. It's used for training, and we're going to talk about why that's problematic for the HR practitioner in a little bit. There's now a number of large AI models. You hear about different ones. So Google has one called Bard. The upper right there is ChatGPT by a company called OpenAI, Claude by a company called Anthropic, and then Meta has their Llama AI model. And you'll see these, you'll hear people that are really techie kind of debate about how each of them works, how big they are, meaning how much information was used to train them. And they'll do different things as we go, but I always like to show this is not just ChatGPT. Every large tech company is going to have their own foundational model. And then as we talk about today, what does the HR world do with AI? A lot of the vendors that we use, either the established vendors like LinkedIn, Indeed, Greenhouse, et cetera, and the startup vendors are oftentimes using AI, but the AI that they're putting into their systems usually relies on a foundational model like this. So we'll be talking about the implications of this as we go. So I'd love if you just toss in the chat there. I'm curious, have you used ChatGPT? It's something that you use every day. I did this, I mentioned I gave a presentation a couple weeks ago here in Chicago. One person said they were using it to do the first draft of their wedding vows. So I hadn't heard that one before. that was an interesting one. But what I want to talk about is, this is the stuff that we've already talked about. That's what's going on today, and it's really incredible. But I always think, for business professionals, we need to be thinking not just about what are the tools we have today, but in this really fast-moving environment, we need to be thinking about what are the tools going to look like tomorrow? What would it look like the next day? So I want to kind of take you through what is the world going to look like in AI 12 to 18 months out. The big thing that's being developed now in the AI world is what is oftentimes called AI agents. And an AI agent is like an updated and superpowered version of an AI system, which is designed to actually go do things out in the world. So for those of you that have used ChatGPT, and it's there on the left side of the slide there, we put in one prompt at a time into ChatGPT, and it tells us something, and then maybe we ask it another question about that, or maybe we tell it to refine the results a little bit. But the next generation of AI systems is going to be able to be given a goal and prompt itself until it's completed its goal. So it's going to be able to basically project manage itself, where we'll be able to say something like, not just like, hey, draft a copy of this email for me. We'll be able to give it like a very clear goal, and it'll be able to prompt itself through several steps. Right now, ChatGPT can access the data that was used to train on. We talked about that training data a little bit previously, but the next generation of AI systems will be able to go online and update itself. So if you ask ChatGPT, what's the weather today out in Chicago, it doesn't know. It's not trained with that information. But the next generation of AI systems will be able to do that. We'll be able to actually go out and do that research and figure those things out. And then the current AI systems like ChatGPT can recommend that you take an action. So if you say, ChatGPT, I'm feeling really hungry, what should I do? And it says, well, you should go order a pizza. The next generation of systems will actually be able to go online and order that pizza for you, right? So you'll have, essentially your own personal admin that can go in and take those actions on your behalf. And for some of us, that's really interesting and cool. For some of us, that might be a little scary, but that's kind of where the technology is going. Let's contextualize this in the HR world a little bit more. And I always say this phrase, which is that what the programs and AI systems now that feel like toys, in a couple months or maybe a year, they're going to look like tools. So this transition from toys to tools, I think, is really important. So on the left there, there's a system called Interview Warmup. It's by Google. You can go use it today. It actually works really, really well. And if you tell it, what sort of jobs are you interviewing for as a candidate, it'll say, well, here's an interview question. You can put in your answer, and it'll converse with you a little bit back and forth. That exists today. But then a couple weeks ago, I found this tool called Écoute, which can, in real time, as the job applicant, actually do the interview for you. So how does it work? Well, let's say again, you're the job candidate. You start an online, Zoom-based interview. The interviewer asks you a question that goes directly into the AI system. It gets transcribed, and it prints out its recommended answer, which the interviewer, which the interviewee, can then read off. And that's crazy to me. Like the idea that there will be candidates applying for our jobs at our companies who are just reading these prompts back from AI systems. And again, it's kind of even noted there, if you want to use this tool today, you have to go on, GitHub, which is where a lot of programmers, they keep their code. You have to do all this kind of like jerry rigging to actually get it to work. That's a toy today, but in a year, that's going to be a tool. There are going to be well-established companies that are selling tools like that for job seekers. Let's keep pulling that thread a little bit. So today, any job applicant can go on ChatGPT or any of the other algorithms and upload their resume and say, hey, can you tailor this resume for me? And we as HR practitioners have spent like the last 50 years telling job candidates that we really want them to tailor their resumes and cover letters for what they're applying for. They can now do this with ChatGPT, and it's not, ChatGPT doesn't just come up with its own. You upload a resume that you used before and said, hey, this was my, my marketing manager resume, and now I'm going in for marketing director. Please update it. Same thing with cover letter writing. So there'll be systems there are systems today, where you upload a cover letter that you've written, and it can rewrite that letter specific to a job title. That's what happens today. But in less than 6 months, my strong prediction is that there will be systems that, again, are going to move from toy to tool. They're going to let job seekers apply for literally thousands of jobs. So instead of what we have today, which is already crazy given the AI systems that exist today, we'll have systems where the job candidate says, here's the job that I want. Here's my resume. Here's my cover letter. Go find me 1,000 jobs that I can apply to. Create a completely dynamic cover letter and resume for each of those jobs specific to each of those companies, and then actually go online and apply for those jobs, like actually do the actions of clicking on whatever the ATS is, Indeed, LinkedIn, or whatever it might be. And it can kind of move us through the process as far as it wants to, right? So if you're a job candidate, you apply for a job, and then you get let's say a form back asking for more information. The AI will be able to fill out that form as well and move you forward through that process. That's really interesting if we think about that from our position as HR practitioners and as the ones doing the hiring. We're used to using AIs or I guess you could say automated systems in our hiring for things like resume scanning, for things like pre-hire assessments. We've had the technology. Job candidates are going to have that technology too. So there'll be a little bit of back and forth over the next couple of years as both sides of that equation get access to these really powerful tools. And I just love, this is an example of one of those toys today. This sort of thing is available on lazyapply.com. I thought that was a great name for someone to do their startup. It says a lot about what they're trying to do over there. Let's talk a little bit now about what AI is going to do to the job market as we think about, from our position in HR, not just on the, on the TA side, but on the L&D side, on our metrics and KPIs of measuring our employees. So this article came out a little while ago where IBM says that they're going to replace almost 8,000 jobs with AI. And really what they said that they're going to do is that they're not going to backfill positions. Now, we haven't seen this come to pass in the economy, have we? I mean, I think that there's real concern about changes in our economy based on AI. But as we all know, we have extremely low employment where we are in the economic cycle. So I don't think this is really hit yet, but I want to think through a couple trends that AI, I think, is going to bring to bear in the next couple of years. The first and probably the most obvious is accelerated amounts of automation. So, probably, if you've gone to a McDonald's in the last several years, you've seen those kiosks on the left side. I've got young kids, so now I'm back going to McDonald's every couple of months. And so whether you like that or you hate it, now you don't order with the person, you order with the kiosk. The next generation of that is going to be in the drive-through, right? So McDonald's several years ago bought a company that interprets human language, so that when you say what your order is in the drive-through, you're not talking to a person anymore. You're going to be talking to an AI system. So you'll see companies, especially in this tight labor market where wages are historically high, pushing for more and more automation. But I don't think it's only, or even most importantly, going to affect our frontline labor. I think it's going to affect white-collar positions more than we might have thought a couple of years ago. So this trend I call English language prompting, which simply means that we spend lots of time in our work days trying to get our information into and out of our systems. So whether that be for HR, whether that be our ATS system, whether that be project management, whether that be our CRM for our sales or marketing teams, whether that be something like Workday. A lot of people use systems like that. And all of those systems where it takes a lot of training and oftentimes expertise to make them do what we want are going to become English language promptable. So I've used HubSpot, which is a CRM, for many years. I spent innumerable hours trying to get reports out of HubSpot, but now they have an AI system where instead of saying, okay, I have to know which 17 clicks to do to get last week's sales report, I just have the AI system there, and I type in, give me last month's sales report, or give me last month's sales report, and create an Excel spreadsheet which compares it, year over year from 12 months ago, and it can create those reports. So that's an example of how anything that can be prompted in English is going to be able to be prompted in English in the kind of the AI age. So that's going to be a substantial change, and of course that saves a lot of time, but there'll be some changes in the labor force as well. So think through how a number of these functions are going to be changing based on AI. So, the marketing department, we tell, especially our junior, our entry-level people, hey, go draft me this email, or go draft me this set of emails for our new campaign. And the junior person drafts them and sends them up to the director or the VP or whatever. The VP now can draft those themselves in just a matter of seconds. Sales is similar. So identifying targets for new products and then emailing them directly. A lot of this has been automated in the sales world for many years, but just getting better and better. Customer support roles, I think this is already pretty far along, right? So my example for this is, if you've ever had to connect with your cable internet provider, right? So your Comcast, Xfinity, or whoever you might use, you go on their site, they don't want you to talk to a real person, they just want you to talk to the AI chatbot, and that's going to keep spreading. And in fact, one thing I saw, which was really cool, was the company had designed an AI chatbot specifically to talk to the AI chatbots of their utility companies, right? So if you've ever had to go through this rigmarole where you sign up for the the 2-year special deal with Xfinity or whatever, and then you're supposed to call them and complain after 2 years and get the lower price again. There's a chat bot now that you can just get on your behalf that goes and does that for you. So again, companies used to have AI, now consumers have AI. It's a big change. In the finance function, so much time is spent running reports. Instead, I'll just type in, hey, give me here's a report that I showed to my senior management. Update it with this month's numbers. Easy, in a matter of seconds, what might have taken a couple hours. And so, in the BI function, that'll be big as well, especially with access to CRM. So why do we talk about all that? I think that if you think about what all these functions or what all these ideas or examples have in common, it's that if we think about what people early in their career who are white collar professionals are doing, a lot of that is going to be automated in a big way. So I think for those of us who are in the HR function where we're already having a hard time hiring Gen Z, we're having a hard time getting Gen Z to stay at our companies for more than a couple of months. This is going to be a big point of friction, and it's something that we'll have to really give some thought to, right? We have to have something for our entry-level employees to be doing. Certainly, you'll probably have some companies that try to hire less of them. So I think that's a kind of an example of where this idea of what I call the easy first draft really does affect what's happening in the HR world. So let's transition a little bit, and especially for those of you who are either just really interested in learning how the AI systems work, or for those of you in L&D, this I think will be pretty interesting. So I love this headline, the hot new programming language is English. So there's this new discipline now that's called prompt engineering. And prompt engineering is basically just trying to get the best or most desired results out of these AI systems. So what does that mean? It means giving it better prompts. We're going to go through an example of this in a second, but prompt engineering is not computer programming. You don't need to know any computer language. You just need to know English, and not even really English, because the AI systems will work with multiple languages. But you see what we're saying, with real human language, not computer language. Now, I'm going to talk about how I think prompt engineering is an incredible skill over the next couple years, and I think that both for those of us who are interested in building our AI skills, and for those of us that want to bring kind of like the 101 level of AI skills into our organization, this is a great place to start. So I think that prompt engineering will end up kind of like Microsoft Office skills, right? So like everyone knows how to use PowerPoint now, so we don't even put it on our resumes. But that's 5 years away. Right now, I think it's a really interesting skill set. So here's an example of a prompt that I gave ChatGPT. This is a screenshot. You see my little picture at the top with the prompt I gave it, and then the results below, kind of in the gray. So I asked ChatGPT, outline a presentation for me on AI and the job market. Okay, and I get these bullet points back. That all seems reasonable, good things I might want to talk about, but you know, can't really take what those are. It's not really a presentation, right? Those are some ideas. Here's another time that I ran exactly the same prompt, and you'll see that I got substantially different results from giving it a longer and more contextual prompt. So, you know, I say, I'm giving a presentation on AI in the job market. This presentation is going to be in PowerPoint, so outline the slides. It's going to be given to mentors in a program who help mid-career job switchers, so I've given it context on the audience. And I want to convey that there'll be some disruptions in the job market due to AI, but the candidates can bolt on skills like prompt engineering. So again, like there's things that I already know about this topic. You know, I wouldn't be giving a presentation if I just had no idea what was going on here. So I tell the system what I already know, what I want to make sure it include, and it's going to include that for me, right? So now the output, which you just see the first couple words of it, it's cut off there. We don't need to go through it, but you know, first of all, it's giving me slides, and I can take these slides and put them directly into a PowerPoint format in a way that I couldn't before. So as we kind of like learn how to prompt these systems, we end up getting better results. And by the way, I assure you I didn't do it for today's presentation, but you can actually take an outline like this, upload it into a different AI system, and it'll create the PowerPoint for you, complete with aligning all the points, which I spent so much time doing over the years, complete with imagery, complete with design. So lots of really interesting things happening out there. Now, as we talk about prompt engineering, how can you actually go learn it? You know, one of the best things to me about these AI systems, they're designed to be easier to use than computer systems have been previously. So you don't need to like go back to school and get a master's degree in prompt engineering. I put these up here as examples on, you know, Coursera, Udemy, of courses that someone could take over a weekend and probably put them in the top 1% globally of the workforce of being able to use these AI systems. So, you know, for those of you interested in AI, you just want to learn more, go through one of these. And again, there's dozens of them. We've gone to HR departments and given training on prompt engineering. So it's something that, you know, your L&D team could bring into your organization. But, you know, as you're trying to learn how to use these systems, actually knowing the questions to ask and the guidelines to give is really important. Okay. Everyone here probably has heard of skills-based hiring because perhaps other than AI, it's the absolute biggest trend in HR, and for really good reasons. So AI is going to be a really good way of doing skills-based hiring because it's just a kind of like what AI and computer systems are good at is exactly this kind of thing, right? So defining skills, being able to pull skills out of resumes, out of LinkedIn profiles, et cetera. Identifying adjacent skills is an important part of skills-based hiring. It's one that AI will likely be good at, as well as things like career pathing. So as we move into more of a skills-based world, you'll see lots of startups as well as more established ATS players who are trying to kind of like bolt on skills-based and AI. And I think it'll probably be a pretty good match. I'd ask my AI system here to give me an image of farm animals at a job interview, and that's what it gave me. And that looks pretty good. But I did ask it to give me a realistic picture. I'm not sure that's particularly realistic. So the AI probably gets a B on that one. Okay, let's move to kind of some of the challenges or focus on like the DEI or the ethical implications of AI. And we're going to talk about this with what I call the 3-pillar model. And I didn't invent this. This is not something that I came up with. If you like do a little bit of research on, you know, safe or responsible AI in different contexts, you'll often see these 3 pillars, but I've kind of modified them to be specific to us as HR leaders. So the first major consideration or major pillar is transparency. So fundamentally, transparency simply means in our context, letting our job applicants or our current employees know when an AI-powered algorithm is being used. It also means telling them a little bit about the algorithm. It means telling them what information is being used for training and for decision making. And often it allows, it requires us giving our applicants or our employees the ability to opt out or to request alternative accommodation. And we're used to doing things like accommodations now as HR leaders. That shouldn't be different. But I've reviewed basically every piece of potential AI regulation in the United States. That's been a lot of them. And everyone I've ever seen requires some element of transparency. So, we as HR leaders need to be expecting that over the next several years, we're going to be telling our job applicants or employees how we're using AI. I asked the AI system to give me a picture for transparency, and I got that little, it was like a little compass in a light bulb. That's pretty good. I thought that was that's probably the best, the A+ image of today. Let's talk about the second major consideration, which is bias. Usually when we think about challenges with AI, especially in the HR context, bias is the issue that immediately comes to mind. What does it mean in this context? Well, in our context in HR, bias refers to the possibility of automated systems misusing protected classifications, right? So we all know that we can't hire candidates based on their race, based on their gender, based on their religious expression, their status as a service-disabled veteran, et cetera, right? So we know that, and we spend a lot of time making sure that we do the right thing in those regards. AI systems have to be told not to do those things, and it's not as simple as just simply telling them. A lot of the challenge with bias is on the data that we use to train it. So in machine learning, there's this phrase called garbage in, garbage out. And what that means in the machine learning and AI world is simply that if you train an AI system with biased information, we expect that the output is going to reflect that bias too. So if we think about, what have we been learning about in terms of our society over the last 5 years, we know that there's been a lot of bias in hiring historically in our country. And so when that information is used to train AI algorithms, the results are likely to include that, that bias too, unless and until we do a really good job of making sure that we don't do that. Every example of bias in AI that I have seen has been unintentional. I always say this because this is an area where we should rightly be concerned and make sure that we're spending some time reducing bias. But I don't like giving the idea that vendors of HR tools are like encrypting bias into their systems intentionally. Basically, every tool and every vendor that we've worked with on an audit basis has gone way out of their way to make sure that they're reducing bias in their systems. So I think it's a thing where we all have to work together on. There's not like a bad guy. It's just something that we need to make sure that we're thoughtful about. Here's a case study. This has happened quite a while ago now, at least in the AI world. I mean, 5 years ago seems like a long time for AI. Amazon, who we all know, created an algorithm to judge their applicants for software engineers. So it trained this algorithm with the resumes of their current software engineering team, who is overwhelmingly men. Okay, so then we start to give the system candidates, and it starts to pick men. Okay, and that's pretty obvious, right? You look at the yes pile, and there's a lot of Bills and Dans in there, and the no pile, a lot of Susans and Beckys. And so the makers of the algorithm say, oh, wait a second, you absolutely can't use gender. But then the system starts to use things that are associated with gender, right? So it starts to do things like prefer candidates that play football and not prefer candidates that played field hockey or that did gymnastics. It starts to do things like give candidates that went to women's colleges lower ratings, right? And again, the people that made the system didn't want that to happen. Explicitly, they didn't want that to happen, right? They're trying to reduce that bias. But what happens within kind of what we call the black box of an algorithm can be kind of hard to figure out, right? And so that's why we have to be so thoughtful about this issue of bias, is because it's not us making a decision to do the wrong thing. It's that this information is encoded in the training data that we give our systems. Ultimately, Amazon discontinued the use of this algorithm, so it's not a thing that Amazon is doing wrong today, but it's kind of like the classic case of bias in AI. Here's the third major pillar, major consideration, which is called explainability. Explainability simply refers to human users' ability to understand, why is this algorithm making this decision, right? So in our HR context, we feed an algorithm 2 resumes and we say, pick one. Why did you choose resume A versus resume B? Can the system explain in human language why that is? And then do we like the explanation, right? Because that ties back to our discussions about bias, right? If we have a system that's perfectly explainable, resume A, resume B, we say, why did you choose A? And the system spits back, well, I'm trying to hire only men over here. We know that's bad, right? We can't do that for sure. And the answer, of course, that we're looking for is, resume A, we hired, and these were the factors. So we looked at, years of experience. We looked at skills, mapping onto what was in the job description. That's why the algorithm made its decision. Then we say, oh, okay, so that's a more justified use of the algorithm. So when we as human users of these systems, who ultimately are responsible for the legal implications and the fairness implications of our decisions, when we are able to see what an algorithm is doing, to understand why it's making those decisions, that's very good. And then the opposite is very bad, right? So if we have, especially systems that we get from vendors, if the vendor won't let us figure out like, why is this algorithm making a decision, I don't think that's a vendor that you want to use. I asked the AI to create an image for me that demonstrate the concept of explainability, and it created these like weird, like alien looking people with like buttons for heads with this like nonsense text. And I thought that was so weird. And I posted it on here just so people see like AI sometimes makes weird mistakes and makes weird stuff. So I don't know, I kept that on there, but that's like an F- for the AI. Here's a case study related to explainability. And this was a case study that, a lawyer who I interviewed for our YouTube channel has been doing pre-hire assessment law for like 20 years, telling me about this. So one of his clients was vetting a certain tool from a vendor. And so they did an audit on the tool, and they found that there was two factors which, according to this algorithm, were going to be most predictive of job success. The first was that the name of the candidate was Justin, and the second was that that candidate played lacrosse in high school, right? So a marker of high socioeconomic status. So when we get that information back from the algorithm, like we know what the algorithm is doing, then we look at it and we say, oh, wait a second, like that's not right. We can't do that. We're not going to use that, right? And so, this company didn't use this tool, of course, but that's kind of the example of what we're looking to get to with explainability. Like we need to make sure we really understand the factors used to make these kind of life-changing decisions for our applicants or for our employees, and importantly, the way that those factors are weighted as an algorithm makes its decision. I thought I'd give the AI a really easy image, or I just said, hey, create an image for my presentation that illustrates the concept of a case study, and it gave me close stuttery. So that was pretty bad for my AI generation too. Let's start thinking about this now from a regulatory and a compliance standpoint. So, we as HR leaders, every year, depending on how many states we operate in, are used to getting from between a couple and dozens of new regulations that we have to pay attention to on a yearly basis. And in the AI world, it's not going to be any different. So a wave is going to be coming to the United States where there's patchwork of both state and actually sometimes municipal regulations over the next year or so. So we're going to deep dive into a New York City regulation in a moment. That's really the only one that's in effect now that's kind of in this like bias prevention world. Illinois, where I'm from, kind of led the nation in this by outlining a certain kind of facial recognition technology in hiring, which was just like so problematic that basically like no one uses that technology anymore. So way to go, Illinois. But we're going to see legislation that requires independent audit and certification of AI hiring systems in New York State, in California, in Colorado, in Washington, in the District of Columbia, in Connecticut, et cetera. And if you want to know what this is probably going to feel like as an HR practitioner, it's probably going to feel a lot like pay transparency, right? So pay transparency starts, it happens in Colorado. We write that little, our lawyers tell us to write the little thing at the bottom of our job post that says, hey, if you are a Colorado applicant, click here to get the job pay range or whatever. But then when California does it, then when New York does it, it's no longer the kind of thing where we can say like, well, we're going to kind of like, look at the legalese and kind of like squeeze our way around it. You're just going to have to do it. And the AI regulation is going to feel that same way, right? So right now, we have candidates who are complying with this New York law, and they're trying to figure out, well, should we exclude our New York candidates, right? If we're a national company hiring remotely, maybe we just don't hire from New York. And that's a thing that you could do. But when California and Colorado and Washington do it, then everyone's going to eventually comply. So this is coming down the pike. Now, the federal government, of course, is going to have a big role in this. So the four big federal departments that kind of affect our employment law and our HR world came together and put out this joint statement that said that they're going to be looking really closely at automated hiring systems. EEOC, probably the primary federal agency, which does exactly this, exactly what the name implies, has three priorities for regulation over the next 3 years, and this is going to be one of them, according to their planning documents. So EEOC is going to be looking really closely at this AI system, and they just put out, now it's probably been 2 months, but they put out a pretty lengthy document talking about how they're going to look at this. And the key concept I want every HR leader to understand is EEOC has been really, really explicitly clear that the existing federal regulations like Title VII, like ADA, apply to these new tools as well. And they've been really explicit that it's us, the employers, who are responsible for the use and misuse of these tools, not the vendors, right? So they're clear in their writings that they say you can't blame the algorithm, is the language that EEOC uses. So that's a really important concept. And of course, we know that we're responsible for things like pre-hire assessments, right? We know that we need to be fair with those. We know that we need our legal department to take a look at those. AI tools are going to be exactly the same way. So we don't get any kind of out just because it's a fancy new kind of tool. Let's deep dive now, just for a minute or two, on New York City Local Law 144. This is an important rule because it's the first of its kind. And what it does, anyone who wants to hear more about this, by the way, email me. We'll talk about it all day long. But fundamentally, its requirement is that the users of automated or AI tools as employers get an independent third-party audit of their systems for racial and gender bias. So see that chart over there on the left, which kind of breaks down the different gender categories, different racial categories. And we have to show the percent of each group that moved through to the next phase of a hiring process. This audit actually has to be made public. So it has to go on publicly available, be on the employer's website, which is really challenging because when we put things like this on our website and other groups like EEOC, like plaintiffs, lawyers, our friends, the plaintiffs, lawyers, like public interest groups, see these sorts of things, if the numbers aren't good, right, if they don't show that the tools that we're using are highly fair, that's going to be a real challenge for employers. The second challenge for this rule is that, as the first of its kind, a lot of copycat legislation is popping up around the country. So, if we take the law that's been proposed and is likely to pass in New Jersey and compare it with the New York City law, almost exactly the same, right? And that happens all the time. That's not unusual in the world of policymaking from one state to the next, but be aware that this kind of like regulatory idea that we have to get our AI systems audited for fairness is going to be relatively widespread. So we're going to see things like very similar legislation in California, which is of course the big kahuna. That's what everyone asks about. In the District of Columbia, where their law is very similar. So we'll see things like this pretty frequently, and this will be part of our new kind of regulatory and compliance life over the next 5 years. So let's close today with a discussion of the 3 things that HR teams should be doing today with relation to AI. We'll go through each of them in turn. The first is we have to set up cross-functional ownership of AI systems. Someone in the organization, in my mind, has to have a registry of what AI systems are in use throughout the company, whether that's developed internally, whether that is purchased from a vendor, or whether that's simply being used from our employees and a free system like ChatGPT without our knowledge, right? Which we'll get to that in a second. But the list has to show what systems are in use, how they're trained, what they're used for, how they're audited. We have to have information about what AI we're using. And what I've seen so far is that this isn't something that should simply just kind of be like tossed into the CTO's or the IT department's lap. HR, I think, should take a big part of the responsibility for doing something like this, simply because the most important decisions that AI is making in many cases is about people issues. So again, feel free to shoot me an email. We could talk about this and how kind of the leading companies in the space are doing it, but there's got to be some institutional control around what AI is using. I asked AI to give me a registry of AI systems, and it gave me this weird image where these people like don't look all the way human, and there's like weird racial stuff going on here. And I put it in here. I made my note, right? So if you pass this to your colleagues, I put in this note that it's problematic. This is a weird and problematic image. And it's just an example of, what comes out of AI systems is not always fair. It's not always what we want. And we just have to be careful. Here's the second big thing that I think that HR leaders should be doing. We have to have a good relationship with our vendors and understand how those vendors are creating these systems. So if I was asking questions of my vendors, I'd be asking things like, how is this algorithm trained? Where did you get the training data? How do you test for bias in your systems? How often do you do it? Do you do this do you have an external independent auditor, or is it something that someone does internally? The third question is really important. It's hard. What's the acceptable level of bias, right? Whenever we do an audit like that, like I showed a couple slides ago, and we show the percent of each racial group that advances through a hiring process, they're always different for different groups, right? And that's understandable, right? That's just the way the world works. That not every group goes through at the same rate, and those rates change in different jobs, in different companies, different contexts. But how different can those groups be before we say, like, wait a second, like something's problematic here? And then that last one, I think this is probably the #1 question I would ask, which is, walk me through this, right? Do what we were talking about in terms of explainability before. I'm going to upload 2 resumes, A and B. Your system chose A. Tell me why. How can I, as the HR leader who isn't able to look inside the algorithm, how do I get an English language summary of why a certain resume was chosen over another? That's a really important one. The AIs came back and gave me this beautiful question mark on the moon image, which I thought was really nice. And then the third thing is we need some policies on that. So if you are in an organization now with more than like 5 employees, I absolutely guarantee you that someone on your staff is using ChatGPT to create some of their work outputs. And it's using it whether you know about it and whether you approve of it or not. So we have to have some kind of system around those things. Now, why do we have to have a system? We don't just want to create like new handbooks for absolutely no reason. What could go wrong? A bunch of things could go wrong. The first being data privacy, especially with regard to personal identifiable information and any kind of financial data. So if we, as HR leaders, if we upload the resumes of our applicants to an AI system like a ChatGPT and say, like, hey, show me which is the best of these resumes, that's been a violation of what we are entrusted with when we have that personal data from our job applicants. We've given it to a separate system, which does not have the same sorts of responsibilities that we do to protect that information. Data security is another thing that can go wrong. So we don't always understand for our AI vendors, how are they thinking about data security? And certainly our vendors are not as responsible for our data as we are. There could be big IP issues. So if we upload our company's intellectual property to an AI system like ChatGPT, do we still own that data, right? Can ChatGPT use that for their future training needs? We've uploaded it freely. We didn't sign any kind of NDA or anything like that. It's problematic. Same with trade secrets. Hallucination is the fancy way of saying when an AI system is just wrong. So when our employees use ChatGPT, we use it like Google to look something up. Sometimes it's just wrong, right? Like there's no way to say it. Like sometimes it's just factually incorrect. So we have to watch that. And of course, we talked extensively today about bias and about discrimination. We have to make sure that however we're using AI systems, that we're being thoughtful about those really important considerations. So if you don't have an AI policy for your employees, I think that you should have one. That's something that we do as well. So happy to talk more about that. All right, that brings me to the end of my presentation today. So I'm going to turn it back to Ty in just 1 second. But before we do that, here's my contact information. Love to talk AI, love to talk HR with anybody. Our company does compliance and DEI audits of those automated systems, particularly for those companies who have employees in New York. This new law that we discussed applies to you, and we do work with companies getting them on the right side of that law. We do training through HR systems, so presentations just like this, we love to do these for HR teams. And then we do development of those employee AI use policies as well. So happy to talk with anybody. My contact information is there and it'll go in the email follow-up. So happy to talk to anyone about AI. All right, Ty?
Thank you, John. And just as John mentioned, now we would like to take your questions, and I'll cover one that a few people have asked before we get to the others that have come in. The handouts can be downloaded from the handout section of the control panel, and an email will be following today's session, which contains the recording as well as, again, the handouts. So just want to let everyone know that they are covered. And with that, now let's get to the questions that came in that I queued up while you were presenting. And the first question is, what are the action steps HR should be doing now to get ahead of these upcoming compliance issues?
That's a great question. What I think that HR should be doing now, kind of related back to the presentation itself, we have to, first of all, have a database of what AI systems we're using. We have to know what we're using them for. We have to know how they're making those decisions. That's really the first step, because it's so easy, especially in a larger organization for certain parts of the organization to not know what sorts of vendors, what sorts of relationships other people have. So making sure there's a central depository where there's someone who's responsible for knowing what AI systems are being used is the most important way to get started with that.
Thank you, John. And our next question reads, how can HR leaders learn more about what's coming in AI?
Yeah, great question. So there's a couple things that you can do. First of all, if you want to go to our website, sign up for our newsletter. It's very focused on compliance and sort of DEI issues related to AI. But if you're interested more broadly, just make sure that you're signed up for all the influencers that talk about this on LinkedIn. So certainly follow me on LinkedIn, because I post kind of more general AI content there. This is a field that's changing so fast, and the number of startups that are getting funded and getting their products off the ground now that are focused on AI and HR is just crazy. So I think that spending a couple of minutes every week just looking around on LinkedIn, seeing what's new is a good way to stay up to date.
Thanks, John. And it looks like we have one more question. Will AI eventually replace recruiters?
Yeah, that's a great question. The answer is no, for sure, but I think it's going to change recruiting quite a bit. So if we think back to, in our presentation, I talk a lot about how kind of these like early career kind of frontline white collar tasks are likely to be automated. And I think that you'll see that in HR. So if you think back to what we were doing, even 5 years ago, even 2 years ago, where so much time and attention was spent on reading resumes, sourcing candidates, doing initial outreach, a bunch of that now can be meaningfully automated, such that when we say, here's the job that we're hiring for, AI systems will be able to take that, will be able to do our job description, which again, I've never met an HR person that loves writing job descriptions. That's something that we love to automate. Automate going out and doing the posting, doing the outreach to folks that we might like to hire, doing some initial screens. But then once we get past that stuff, HR is always about people, and there's no way that a computer system can make that final decision. So we've talked about steps of that kind of hiring funnel that we can automate, but as we get towards the end of it, to get to kind of talking to our top candidates, having them visit our office, having them do an example of their work product, there's always going to be that human touch, that human decision making that we get from years of experience that I just don't think AI is going to be able to do, at least during my lifetime, I would say.
Perfect. Well, you answered the other question that slipped in, if AI would be replacing tasks that required humans touch. So thank you for that. And with that, I'll pass it back to you for any closing remarks.
Well, great. I just want to thank everybody for being here. We're going to send out, we'll send out the slides. We'll send out a link back to our website. Again, feel free to follow me or connect with me on LinkedIn. And if your organization is trying to figure out how do we put AI into place the right way, we'd love to have a conversation. Thanks, Ty.
Thank you, John. And with that, on behalf of HR Morning, I would also like to thank everyone for attending. This concludes our program.